The drive from Abilene to Dallas took just under 3 hours, and Margaret Calloway made it in her 2009 Ford F250, the same truck she used to haul feed bags and check fence lines on the western edge of her property. The cab smelled faintly of hay and motor oil, and the passenger seat held a crumpled paper bag with a ham sandwich she hadn't touched since leaving home at noon. She wasn't hungry. She was nervous, though she would never have admitted it to anyone. Maggie gripped the steering wheel with both hands, her knuckles rough and brown from decades of outdoor work, her nails cut short and practical. She wore her nicest jeans, dark blue, pressed with a crease, a pearl snap western shirt in pale gray, her good boots, the ones she reserved for church and the occasional county auction. She'd brushed her salt and pepper hair and pinned it back at the nape of her neck. She'd even put on a little lipstick, a dusty rose color that Brooke had picked out for her 2 Christmases ago. She looked exactly like what she was, a hard-working Texas farm woman who had taken some care with herself for a special occasion. The occasion was her daughter's engagement party. Brooke had called 3 weeks ago, breathless and glowing through the phone. "Mom, I know it's far, and I know it's fancy, but please come. Please. It's at the Whitmore Grand. Derek's family is hosting. Just come, okay? Wear something nice," Maggie had promised. And Maggie Calloway kept her promises. The Whitmore Grand Hotel stood at the corner of McKinney Avenue and Harwood Street in uptown Dallas, a gleaming tower of glass and pale limestone that caught the late afternoon sun and threw it back at the street in blinding sheets. A uniformed valet stood at the entrance beneath a burgundy awning. 2 women in cocktail dresses and heels clicked past the revolving doors without breaking stride, laughing at something on one of their phones. Maggie pulled the F250 into the valet lane and cut the engine. She sat for just a moment, looking up at the building through the windshield, then took a breath, grabbed her small clutch purse, brown leather, slightly scuffed, and stepped out. The valet, a young man no older than 20 with slicked hair and a practiced smile, approached and then visibly hesitated. His eyes moved from the truck to Maggie's boots to the clutch purse, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite rudeness, but a recalibration, a quiet demotion. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "are you here for an event?" "Calloway Whitfield engagement party," Maggie said. "Brooke Calloway, of course." He took her keys without further comment, though she noticed he didn't offer the kind of cheerful small talk he'd given the couple who arrived behind her in a silver Mercedes. She didn't say anything. She walked through the revolving door. The lobby of the Whitmore Grand was the kind of space designed to make certain people feel important and everyone else feel small. 40-foot ceilings soared above a floor of white marble veined with gold. A floral arrangement the size of a small tree erupted from a central pedestal, white orchids, eucalyptus, roses in blush and cream. The air smelled of something expansive and faintly citrus. Soft piano music drifted from somewhere unseen. A woman in a black blazer stood near the concierge desk with a clipboard and an earpiece. She looked at Maggie with the polished blankness of someone trained to be discreet about their judgment. "Good afternoon. Are you with the Calloway Whitfield party?" "I am. I'm Margaret Calloway, Brooke's mother." The woman checked her list, found the name, and smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. 8th floor, the Magnolia Ballroom. "Elevators are to your right." Maggie thanked her and crossed the lobby. She was aware of the looks, the quick sideways assessments that people in expensive clothes gave to someone who didn't fit the room. A man in a tailored suit spoke quietly to his companion and glanced at her boots. She pressed the elevator button and waited, her face calm, her spine straight. She had been looked at like that before. It never stopped stinging. But she had learned, over the course of 51 years of living, to keep the sting on the inside where it belonged. The Magnolia Ballroom was everything the lobby promised and more. Round tables draped in ivory linen filled the center of the room, each set with crystal stemware and small arrangements of garden roses. Champagne flutes caught the light from chandeliers overhead. At one end of the room, a string quartet played something classical and understated. At the other, a long table held a spread of appetizers, smoked salmon blinis, miniature beef Wellingtons, bruschetta with heirloom tomatoes. Perhaps 70 people moved through the room, most of them dressed in the kind of effortless elegance that comes from either old money or deliberate aspirations. The women wore structured dresses and jewelry that caught light. The men wore suits that fit like second skin. Maggie spotted Brooke near the windows. Her daughter was radiant, truly. Heartbreakingly radiant, in a cream silk dress that skimmed her slim figure, her dark hair down in soft waves. Her face lit from within by a happiness that made Maggie's chest tighten with love and something close to grief. Beside her stood Derek Whitfield, tall and handsome, in a charcoal suit, his arm around her waist with easy ownership. He was laughing at something someone had said, and Brooke was laughing too. And for a moment Maggie just stood at the edge of the room and watched her daughter exist in this world that was so far from the one they'd shared. Then Brooke saw her. "Mom." She crossed the room quickly, threading between guests, and pulled Maggie into a hug that smelled of perfume Maggie didn't recognize. "You made it. You actually made it," said I would. Maggie held her tight for a moment. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. You look great too." Brooke pulled back and studied her with the careful eyes of a daughter who loves her mother and worries about her simultaneously. "Come on. I want you to meet Derek's family." Derek's family occupied the prime real estate of the party, the cluster near the windows with the best view, and the most attentive waitstaff. His father, Gerald Whitfield, was a broad-shouldered man in his early 60s with a politician's handshake and careful eyes. His mother, Susan Whitfield, was elegant and warm, in a way that felt genuine, and she took both of Maggie's hands and said, "We are so glad you could come. Brooke talks about you constantly." Maggie liked them immediately. It was the other woman she didn't like. Diana Ashford was standing just to the left of the Whitfields, holding a champagne glass with two fingers the way women in movies do, as if the glass itself were an accessory. She was perhaps 50, though she wore it aggressively, hair the color of expensive caramel blown out to perfection. A cobalt blue dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Diamonds at her ears and throat that were tasteful only because they were real. She was the kind of beautiful that announces itself and then waits for acknowledgement. She looked at Maggie the way some people look at a scratch on a new car. "And you are?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough across the small group to turn a few heads. "Margaret Calloway," Maggie said. "Brooke's mother." Diana's eyes did a slow, complete inventory: boots, jeans, pearls, snap shirt, clutch purse, hands, and she smiled. It was the kind of smile that contains a verdict. "How lovely," she said. "Did you drive in?" Where's it you're from?" "Abilene." "Abilene." She said it the way someone repeats an unfamiliar word they don't expect to use again. "That's quite a drive. In that truck I saw out front?" A couple near them had gone quiet. Brooke's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on Maggie's arm. "That's right," Maggie said. "Brooke mentioned you have a farm," Diana continued pleasantly, the word farm dropping into the conversation like a stone into still water. "That must be charming. Do you do crops or is it animals? I always mix those up." There was a small, exclusive laugh from somewhere too. Diana's left, Raymond Voss standing just behind her, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a banker's posture, lifted his champagne glass slightly, as if toasting the observation. "Both," Maggie said. "Both." "My goodness," Diana tilted her head. "And you manage that all by yourself? Since your husband, Brooke, mentioned she grew up without her father, that must have been incredibly hard. Doing all of that alone." She paused just long enough. "I think it's admirable, truly, what you've built, whatever that is." The words were delivered with surgical precision, each one reasonable on its own, each one designed, in sequence, to diminish. Farm, alone, whatever that is. The room around them had not gone silent, but the small corner of it where they stood had developed a charged, held breath quality. Brooks's face had gone carefully neutral in the way of someone trying not to show pain in public. Gerald Whitfield looked mildly uncomfortable. Susan touched her husband's arm. Maggie looked at Diana Ashford for a long, steady moment. "Thank you," she said simply. "Brooke, show me where they're keeping the good coffee." She said it lightly, icily, with a small smile for the room, and turned away from Diana without another word, not with anger, not with visible hurt, but with the unhurried calm of a woman who has decided something isn't worth her energy. As she walked with Brooke toward the coffee service, she heard Diana say something to Raymond Voss in a lowered voice, followed by a quiet, shared laugh. She kept walking. Later, in the marble bathroom down the hall from the ballroom, Maggie stood at the sink and ran cold water over her wrists the way she'd done since she was a girl when she needed to settle something down inside herself. She looked at her face in the mirror, the sun lines around her eyes, the strong jaw, the gray threading through her hair, and thought about her mother, who had worked these same kinds of long days on a smaller piece of land with less of everything, and had never once asked for the world to see her clearly. "You know what you are," her mother used to say. "You don't need them to know it too." The bathroom door opened and Brooke came in. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, and her composed party face crumpled slightly at the edges. "Mom, I'm sorry. She had no right. She didn't bother me." "Mom, Brooke." Maggie dried her hands and turned around. "I'm fine. I promise you. Are you happy? With Derek, with all of this?" Brooke's eyes went soft. "Yes, I really am." "Then that's the only thing that matters tonight." Maggie smoothed her daughter's hair back from her face, the way she had when Brooke was small. "Now let's go back in there and eat those little beef things. I haven't had dinner." Brooke laughed, a surprised, wet laugh, and hugged her mother again. I love you too." Maggie patted her back. "Come on." What Brooke didn't know, what almost no one in that ballroom knew, was that the woman in the pearl snap shirt and the dusty boots was the sole owner of the Callaway Land Trust, a privately held entity controlling 14,200 acres of ranch and agricultural land across Taylor, Nolan, and Jones counties in West Texas. She owned 3 active oil and gas leases with royalty income that deposited automatically into an account she rarely checked. She had made a quiet, cash purchase of 800 acres of hill country property 6 years ago that had since tripled in assessed value. She had never been on a Forbes list. She had never sought one. She drove a 2009 truck because she liked it. She wore boots because she worked in them. She owned one dress, a navy blue thing she wore to funerals and the occasional formal event, and she had not brought it tonight because she hadn't thought it would matter. It had never occurred to her that it would need to matter. But in the days following that party, she would learn that Diana Ashford's real estate development company, Ashford Capital Group, had its eye on precisely the kind of land Maggie owned, and that the polished, champagne-holding woman who had smiled so pleasantly while reducing her to nothing was about to walk directly into the one arena where Maggie Callaway had never lost. The party ended at 10. Maggie drove home in the dark, the Texas interstate stretching out flat and wide ahead of her headlights. She didn't turn on the radio. She thought about Brooke's face, lit up and beautiful and happy, and decided it had been worth the drive. She didn't think about Diana Ashford at all. Not yet. 3 weeks after the engagement party, on a Tuesday morning that arrived gray and smelling of approaching rain, Cole Harrington drove out to the Callaway property in his white Land Cruiser, with a manila folder on the passenger seat and an expression on his face that Maggie recognized immediately. As "There's something you need to know." Cole was 53, lean and sun-darkened, with wire-rimmed glasses and the deliberate, unhurried manner of a man who had spent 30 years in land law and had learned that patience was the most expensive thing a person could own. He had been Maggie's attorney since she was 29 years old, when her father died and left her the original 3,400 acres and a pile of debt that would have buried most people. Cole had helped her keep it. Then he'd helped her grow it. He was the closest thing to a confidant she had. She met him at the gate in her work truck, and they drove together up to the house. A low, wide ranch-style structure with a deep porch, practical and unpretentious, set back from the main road by a quarter-mile of gravel driveway lined with mesquite trees. She poured coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table with the folder between them and the window behind, Cole showing the slow approach of storm clouds from the northwest. "Ashford Capital Group," Cole said, opening the folder. "You know the name?" Maggie looked at him over her coffee mug. "I've met the woman." Cole raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. "They've been acquiring land across West Texas for the past 14 months. Commercial real estate pivot. They're calling it a mixed-use development corridor. Luxury ranch resorts, private airstrips, that kind of thing. High-end tourism infrastructure. They've already bought out 4 ranches in Taylor County, 2 in Nolan." He slid a map across the table. It showed the counties in pale yellow with parcels marked in red. Several clustered along Route 277. A few were farther west near the edge of Nolan County. Maggie studied the map. She didn't say anything. "What they want," Cole continued carefully, "is a contiguous corridor. Enough connected acreage to build something that looks like a destination. And the problem, or the opportunity, depending on how you look at it, is that the properties they've bought so far form an incomplete picture." He tapped the map with one finger. "The gap in the middle, the piece that connects everything and makes the whole project viable, is mine," Maggie said. "About 6,800 acres of yours, yes. The western section, including the Flat Creek parcels and the stretch along the county road." Maggie set down her mug. Outside, the first drops of rain began to tap against the window glass, slow. "I received a call yesterday from a Raymond Voss. He's their lead financial officer. He was very cordial, very professional. Said they were interested in having a conversation about acquisition. He used that word, conversation, and that they hoped we could discuss terms at our earliest convenience." Raymond Voss. The man with the silver hair and the champagne glass. The one who had laughed at Diana's comment at the party. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd relay the message." Cole folded his hands on the table. "Maggie, this is going to be a significant play. They've got resources, and they've got determination, and they've already built momentum in this area. If they can't get your land cooperatively, they will look at every possible legal angle, eminent domain, water rights challenges, easement disputes. They will make this as complicated as they can. Let them." Cole looked at her steadily. "I'm not saying don't fight it. I'm saying go in with your eyes open." "My eyes are always open, Cole." She looked back at the map, at the red parcels closing in on the unmarked acres that represented 30 years of her life. "Set up the meeting." Cole's expression shifted slightly. Not surprised exactly, but a kind of alert attention. "You want to meet with them?" "I want to look Raymond Voss in the eye and let him tell me what he thinks my land is worth." She picked up her coffee again. "And then I want to hear what Diana Ashford has to say when she walks into a room and finds me on the other side of the table." The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday in Dallas, at Ashford Capital Group's offices on the 34th floor of a building on Ross Avenue. Cole arranged it with Voss's assistant over email, listing the attendees as Margaret Calloway and legal counsel. He did not elaborate further. Maggie did not call Brooke about any of it. This was not her daughter's battle to carry, and Maggie had no intention of letting business cloud what should be the happiest season of Brooke's life. She handled the preparations quietly, reviewing deeds and lease agreements with Cole, pulling the trust documents, making 2 phone calls to her accountant in Austin and 1 to a land appraiser she trusted. She also, on the Wednesday before the meeting, drove to a modest dress shop in downtown Abilene that she'd pass 100 times without entering, and bought a pair of dark wool trousers and a simple cream blouse. Not expensive, just clean and composed. She drew the line at new shoes. She wore her good boots. The night before the meeting, Brooke called. "Mom, I need to tell you something." Her voice had a tight, careful quality that Maggie recognized as her daughter trying to be tactful about something difficult. "Derek told me, and I don't know why she did this. I really don't. But Diana Ashford said something to Susan Whitfield about you, about the party. She was apparently describing you to some of her friends, and she called you." Brooke stopped. "She called you the barn woman." Maggie was quiet for a moment. "She said it at a lunch," Brooke continued, the tactfulness losing ground to something more raw, like it was a joke, and apparently it made the rounds. "I only found out because Derek heard it from his mother and told me, and Mom, I'm so angry. I wanted to call her and you didn't call her." "No, but I wanted to." "Good, don't." Maggie was sitting on the porch in the dark, looking out at the pasture where the outline of the fence line was barely visible against a sky thick with stars. A whippoorwill called somewhere in the dark. The air smelled of grass and recent rain. "Brooke, do you trust me?" "Of course." "Then let me handle this my way, which is quietly and at the right time, and without you getting in the middle of it." "What does that mean?" "It means what it means." Maggie's voice was gentle. "Tell me about the wedding planning. What have you decided about the venue?" Brooke was quiet for a beat. Then, "You're doing something, aren't you?" "I'm going to Dallas tomorrow for a business meeting." "Mom, good night, sweetheart. I love you." She hung up and sat with the phone in her lap and the stars overhead, and the sounds of her land all around her, crickets and wind, and the distant lowing of cattle from the south pasture, and felt the steady, private satisfaction of a woman who knows exactly what she's doing and sees no reason to explain it to anyone. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Diana Ashford stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her home office in Highland Park, a glass of Sancerre in hand, and reviewed the proposal her team had prepared for the Callaway acquisition. The numbers were good, generous even by rural Texas standards. She had authorized Voss to open at $8,000 an acre for the primary parcel, which she privately considered more than fair for land that had been sitting there growing mesquite and feeding cows. "The attorney's name is Harrington," Voss had told her. "Cole Harrington, out of Abilene. Good reputation. Solid land law background. The client is the woman herself, Margaret Callaway." Diana had gone still for a moment, then she'd smiled. The farmer from the engagement party. Apparently so. Well, she'd sipped her wine. This should be simple enough. Make the offer clear, make the timeline clear, and if she needs a moment to understand the numbers, be patient with her. Voss had nodded in the practiced way of someone who is paid to agree with things he privately questions. "I'll handle it personally," Diana had said. She hadn't connected in any meaningful way the quiet woman in the western shirt and the good boots with an entity worth considering seriously. She had made the most expensive kind of mistake. She had looked at a person and seen only their surface. That same evening, 30 miles from Diana's window, Brooke Callaway sat in the apartment she shared with Derek and opened her laptop. She typed her mother's name into a property records database she'd learned about from a paralegal friend. She stared at the results for a long time. Then she closed the laptop, went to the kitchen, and poured herself a very large glass of water. She thought about all the times she'd sent her mother money, small amounts, because she worried, because the farm always seemed to be barely holding on, because Maggie drove an old truck and wore the same boots for years and said things like, "We're comfortable," in the carefully neutral tone of someone managing expectations. She thought about that phrase differently now. We're comfortable. The Ashford Capital Group offices occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower on Ross Avenue, and the reception area on 34 was the kind of space that functioned as a declaration of intent, white oak paneling, abstract art in muted golds and grays, low leather seating in cognac and cream, and a reception desk staffed by a young woman with a headset and the serene composure of someone who fielded wealthy people all day and had learned to calibrate her warmth accordingly. Maggie arrived 7 minutes early. Cole was beside her, dressed in his good charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that was old but immaculate. They checked in and were shown to a waiting area with a view across the Dallas skyline that was, objectively, spectacular. The city spread out in every direction, glass and steel catching the morning sun. Cole sat. Maggie stood at the window. "You doing all right?" Cole asked quietly. "I'm fine." She turned from the window. "Did you bring the mineral rights documentation?" "Everything's in here." He patted the briefcase. "The '09 water survey?" "Yes, and the Jones County appraisal from March?" "Maggie." He looked at her over his glasses. "I have everything. I've been doing this for 24 years. She almost smiled. "I know, I just like to be sure." They waited 11 minutes, not quite long enough to be truly rude, but just long enough to signal something about who was more eager for this meeting. Then the assistant appeared and led them down a wide hallway to a conference room with a long table of pale wood and chairs in dark leather, and, at the far end, a credenza bearing coffee service and a arranged fruit platter that no one would touch. Raymond Voss was already there, standing near the window with the posture of a man accustomed to receiving people. He was dressed more formally than the engagement party, a charcoal suit, tie in deep burgundy, silver cufflinks. He extended his hand to Cole first, then to Maggie, and if he recognized her from the party, his expression gave nothing away. "Mrs. Calloway, thank you for making the drive. Can we offer you coffee?" "Please," she said. "Black." An assistant poured. Voss gestured to the chairs, and they sat. Cole and Maggie on one side of the table. Voss and a younger man he introduced as his associate, Preston Daly, on the other. The door opened again. Diana Ashford walked in. She wore a charcoal pantsuit of some expensive material and heels that added 3 inches she didn't need. Her hair was perfect, her jewelry restrained, her expression set to professional warmth, the businesswoman version of the social version Maggie had met at the party. She looked at Maggie, and the warmth flickered. Not much, a small hesitation, a recalibration, but Maggie caught it the way she caught everything. Quietly, completely, without showing she'd noticed. "Mrs. Calloway," Diana said, settling into the chair at the head of the table with the ease of someone on their own territory. "It's nice to see you again, under more formal circumstances." "Mrs. Ashford," Maggie said. Diana smiled and opened the folder in front of her. "Well, we're grateful you came in. I want to say up front that we have a great deal of respect for what you've built in West Texas. Generational land stewardship is something we genuinely value, and our hope is to have a conversation today that reflects that respect." She had clearly practiced this opening. It was good, warm, complimentary, vaguely condescending in the way that generational land stewardship positioned Maggie as a caretaker of something rather than an owner of it. Cole, to his credit, kept his expression neutral. "What we're proposing," Voss picked up smoothly, "is an acquisition of approximately 6,800 acres of the western Calloway parcels, including the Flat Creek corridor and the county road frontage. We've prepared an offer that we believe is genuinely competitive for the region." He slid a document across the table. Cole took it and reviewed it without expression. "Opening at $8,000 per acre, which for the acreage in question represents a total purchase price of $54,400,000. Voss folded his hands. "We believe that's a strong number for the current market." There was a brief silence. Maggie picked up her coffee cup and took a sip. "Mr. Voss," Cole said, setting down the document, "can you walk me through how you arrived at the 8,000 per acre figure?" Voss nodded to Preston Daly, who opened a laptop and began presenting a market analysis, comparable sales in the region, assessed values, agricultural land indices. The numbers were competent and well-researched for what they were, which was a survey of surface value. Surface value only. Cole let him finish. Then he opened his briefcase and laid a single document on the table. "This is the mineral rights summary for the Flat Creek corridor and the adjacent parcels," he said. "Filed with the Texas Railroad Commission. Active oil and gas leases, current royalty income, projected reserve values based on the most recent geological survey." He slid it across. "Perhaps your team would like to review this before we discuss what the land is worth." The room went quiet in a specific way, the quiet of people recalculating. Voss picked up the document. His associate leaned in. Diana's eyes moved from the document to Maggie, and for the first time since she'd walked into the room, something genuine crossed her face, not quite alarm, but the first intimation of it. "These leases," Voss said carefully, "are they current, active, and held in perpetuity by the Callaway Land Trust?" Cole said. "The royalty income alone, averaged over the past 5 years, represents approximately $4.2 million annually. The projected reserve value of the underlying rights, at current crude pricing, is in excess of $300 million. No one moved. Diana Ashford set down her pen. Maggie looked at her across the length of the pale wood table, not triumphantly, not coldly, but with the simple, steady attention of a woman who has been patient for exactly as long as patience was required. "We're also happy to discuss," Cole continued, his tone as unhurried as ever, "the 800-acre hill country parcel my client holds in Gillespie County, which was acquired in 2019 at $1,200 per acre and is currently assessed at $4,100. Or the water rights documentation for the Flat Creek watershed, which your team may not have fully accounted for in your corridor planning. Those rights extend to approximately 12 miles of upstream access, and without them, your resort development faces some significant infrastructure challenges." Preston Daly had stopped typing. Raymond Voss cleared his throat. Diana's expression had reorganized itself into something carefully blank, the professional mask reasserted, but the edges slightly less precise than before. She looked at Maggie with new eyes. Not warm eyes, not friendly eyes, but real ones for the first time. Eyes that were actually seeing who was across the table from her. "Mrs. Callaway," she said, and her voice was several degrees cooler than when she'd walked in. "It seems we may need to revisit our initial offer." "That would be reasonable," Maggie said. She set down her coffee cup. She did not smile. The meeting ran for 2.5 hours. By the end of it, Ashford Capital Group had acknowledged that their original offer was inadequate, had requested a 60-day window to conduct a full revised assessment, and had agreed to provide Maggie's team with complete access to their development plans for the corridor, a concession that Cole had pressed for and that Diana had resisted for 40 minutes before yielding. In the elevator going down, Cole exhaled slowly and allowed himself a small, restrained expression of satisfaction. "That went well," he said. "It went the way it was going to go," Maggie said. "You could have led with the mineral rights documentation. You didn't have to let them present their offer first, I know. Why didn't you?" The elevator opened into the lobby. Maggie walked toward the glass doors, and the Dallas noon light came in bright and clean around the edges. "I wanted to hear what they thought it was worth," she said, "when they thought they had the advantage." The 60 days that followed were not quiet ones. Ashford Capital Group moved, as Cole had predicted they would, along several fronts simultaneously. A revised offer arrived, better, significantly better, but still structured as an acquisition rather than a partnership, which was a distinction Maggie had begun to think carefully about. There were calls from Voss's office. There were emails from Preston Daly, earnest, detail-heavy emails that Maggie read carefully and forwarded to Cole without responding directly. There was also, less officially, a campaign. She heard about it first from her neighbor Frank Delacroix, a quiet man of 60 who ran cattle on the 2,000 acres adjacent to her eastern fence line, and who drove, over one afternoon, with a troubled expression and a printed email he'd received from a regional real estate association. "They're saying the corridor development would bring significant economic benefit to the region," Frank said, reading from the email at Maggie's kitchen table. "They're talking to county commissioners. Somebody told me they've already had a meeting with the Taylor County judge." "When?" "Last week." Frank set down the paper. "Maggie, I don't want to be alarmist, but they're building a public argument. If they can get enough political support, they could potentially push for a public benefit designation on the development, which would open the door to eminent domain proceedings," Maggie said. Frank looked at her. You knew. Cole told me it was a possibility 2 months ago. She looked at the email without touching it. They can file for it. They won't win it, but they can try to make the process expensive enough and long enough that a smaller landowner would sell to make it stop. Frank was quiet for a moment. You're not a smaller landowner. No. She stood and refilled his coffee. I'm not. What she hadn't accounted for, what no amount of practical preparation had fully prepared her for, was Brooke. Her daughter drove down from Dallas on a Saturday morning, unannounced. Pulling up in the small sedan she drove with a look on her face that Maggie recognized as the one Brooke wore when she had decided something and was no longer asking permission. They sat on the porch. The morning was cool and brilliant, the sky a hard, clean blue above the mesquite. A hawk circled something in the south pasture. I looked you up, Brooke said. The property records, the trust documents. I found what I could find. She looked at her mother sideways. Why didn't you ever tell me? Maggie considered the question carefully. Tell you what exactly, Mom? We were comfortable. I told you that. Comfortable. Brooke's voice was careful, but there was something jagged underneath it. Mom, the numbers I found, you're not comfortable. I don't even know what word to use. You let me send you money every Christmas. $200 because I thought. She stopped, her jaw tightened. I thought you were struggling. The hawk found what it was looking for and dropped. The mesquite moved in a small wind. I kept the money, Maggie said, every cent of it. Brooke stared at her. I put it in an account, Maggie said simply. It's yours. It's been yours since the first check you sent. I kept it because you needed to know you could do that you could take care of someone, that you had that in you. She looked at her daughter. And you did. Brooks's face moved through several things. Her eyes went bright. Why didn't you tell me about all of it? She asked, her voice smaller now. The land, the leases, all of it. Why did I grow up thinking we were barely making it? Maggie was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather left me this land with a debt load that nearly broke us, she said. For the first 7 years after he died, we genuinely were barely making it. You were small. You don't remember those years because I made sure you didn't have to. She looked out at the pasture. By the time things turned, by the time the leases started producing, and I was able to pay off the debt and start buying, you were used to the way we lived. And I liked that. I liked that you grew up knowing what work looked like, knowing the land, knowing how to be without things and not feel the lack. She paused. I didn't want you to be someone who grew up thinking money was the thing. Brooke was quiet for a long time. The hawk rose again, carrying something. Diana Ashford called me the barn woman, Brooke said finally. I know, you told me. And you went and sat across a conference table from her. I did. Brooke was quiet for another moment. Then, slowly, the tension around her jaw eased and something else came. Complicated and layered, something that took a moment to identify as pride. She had no idea, Brooke said. No, Maggie agreed. She didn't. The political maneuvering that Cole had predicted materialized in week 5 of the 60-day window, precisely on schedule. Ashford Capital Group's lobbyist, a smooth Dallas attorney named Brandon Forsyth, appeared at a Taylor County Commissioners meeting and made a presentation about economic development, job creation, and regional investment that was well-funded and well-rehearsed. Cole attended. Maggie did not. What Cole did, quietly and without announcement, was distribute to each commissioner a bound document containing a full overview of the Callaway Land Trust's existing economic contributions to Taylor, Nolan, and Jones counties, property tax payments over 30 years, agricultural employment records, water rights agreements that supported downstream municipal needs, charitable contributions to county schools, hospitals, and the Abilene Food Bank. He also included a brief polite note from Maggie herself, addressed to each commissioner by name, thanking them for their public service and noting that her family had been voting members of Taylor County for 4 generations. The lobbyist's presentation went smoothly. The commissioners were attentive and polite. The economic development motion Forsyth was hoping for was tabled unanimously. On the 48th day, Raymond Voss called Cole directly. "We'd like to propose a different structure," he said. "Mrs. Calloway's current position is clearly not a pure sale. We understand that. We'd like to discuss a joint venture arrangement, a partnership structure in which the Calloway Land Trust retains ownership of the mineral rights and a specified percentage of surface interest, while Ashford Capital develops the resort and hospitality infrastructure." Cole said he would relay the message. He drove out to the farm that evening. Maggie was in the barn when he arrived, actually in the barn, in work clothes, checking a calf that had been born 2 days earlier with a respiratory issue that was resolving. She came out, wiping her hands on a rag, looked at him and said, "Joint venture." Cole blinked. "How did you? It's the only move they had left that made sense." She nodded toward the house. "Come in. I'll put on coffee." They sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where this had all started, and went through the possibilities. A joint venture had genuine merit. It would let Maggie keep the mineral rights, maintain a stake in the land's future, and potentially benefit from the development's revenue without surrendering the things that mattered most. But it would also put her in business with Diana Ashford. "That's the part one keep coming back to," Maggie said. Cole looked at her over his glasses. "The question is whether it's the best structure for the land, not whether it's comfortable for the people at the table." "I know what the question is. She's a good developer," Cole said, with the slight reluctance of someone giving credit they'd rather withhold. "Her projects perform. She knows how to build something that lasts." Maggie looked at the table for a long time. Outside, the evening was coming in slow and lavender over the mesquite. Somewhere in the south pasture, the cattle were moving toward water. This land, this specific light. The way the air smelled at this hour, dry and faintly sweet, like warm grass and earth. "Set up the meeting," she said. "In Abilene this time." Cole looked up. "On my ground," Maggie said. "That's the condition. They want to talk partnership, they can drive to Abilene." 2 days later, she was checking the fence line on the west side of the property when her phone buzzed. Derek Whitfield, Brooke's fiancé. She almost let it go to voicemail. Then she answered. "Mrs. Calloway." His voice was careful. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I'm working." "What do you need, Derek?" A brief pause. "I owe you an apology. Diana Ashford is a friend of my parents', my mother's friend specifically. I heard what she said about you at the party, and I should have said something to her directly. I didn't, and I've been carrying that, and I wanted you to know that I'm sorry." Maggie stood at the fence line with the phone to her ear and looked west, where the land went flat and wide all the way to the horizon. "You're going to marry my daughter," she said. "Yes, ma'am, I hope so. Then I need you to be the kind of man who says something in the moment, not 2 months later." She kept her voice even, not unkind. "Can you be that?" A longer pause. "Yes, I think so. I'm going to try." "Good." She looked down at the fence post, running her hand along the wire to check the tension. "You're a good enough man, Derek. Don't let people like Diana Ashford set the temperature of the room you're in. You're better than that." "Yes, ma'am. Come out sometime. I'll show you the land." She hung up and went back to checking the fence. Diana Ashford drove to Abilene on a Thursday morning in a rented Escalade. She had considered driving her own car and decided against it, and then reconsidered, and finally called her assistant to arrange the rental, which in retrospect told her something about the state of her thinking that she wasn't entirely comfortable with. She was, quietly and without any dramatic announcement, uncertain. This was not a condition she was accustomed to. Raymond Voss rode with her, and they reviewed the joint venture proposal for the third time during the drive, going over terms and structure and the concession points they were prepared to offer. Voss was precise and prepared, as he always was. Diana listened with half her attention and spent the other half looking out the window at the West Texas landscape passing beyond the glass, wide and flat and enormous, the sky taking up more space than the earth, the scrub and mesquite stretching to a horizon that seemed both very near and impossibly far. She had grown up in Houston. She had built her career in Dallas. She had done deals in Austin, San Antonio, Fort Worth, and a dozen smaller cities in between. She considered herself someone who knew Texas. She was realizing, somewhere on the stretch of I-20 west of Abilene, that she did not know this Texas, this specific, austere, sun-hammered Texas that produced women like Margaret Calloway and apparently didn't feel any need to explain itself. She could have led with the mineral rights documentation in the first meeting, she said suddenly. Voss looked at her. I'm sorry, at the Ross Avenue meeting. She had all of it. Harrington had everything prepared. She could have put it on the table from the beginning and saved us 2 hours of a proposal she already knew was inadequate. Diana looked at her own reflection in the window glass. She didn't. She let us present. Voss was quiet for a moment. She wanted to see what we knew. No. Diana turned from the window. She wanted to see how we behaved when we thought we had the advantage. She picked up the proposal document and looked at it without reading it. That's a different thing. The meeting was held not in an office, but at the Calloway property itself specifically. At the kitchen table, which Maggie had set with coffee and a plate of sliced peach cake that she'd made the night before. Cole was there. Maggie was there. Diana and Voss arrived with Preston Daly, who immediately opened his laptop and looked relieved to have something to do with his hands. Diana walked in and looked at the kitchen, the practical counters, the worn linoleum. Diana accepted hers. Their eyes met over the mug, briefly and directly, and something passed between them that was not warmth and was not hostility, but was something more useful than either: honesty. Before we begin, Diana said, I want to say something that isn't part of the negotiation. Cole glanced at Maggie. Maggie was still. The way I spoke to you at your daughter's party was rude and dismissive, Diana said. It was intended to be, and that's worse, not better. I was making assumptions about who you were based on how you looked, and I was using those assumptions to position myself socially, which is something I do, and something I dislike about myself. She held Maggie's gaze. I'm sorry for it. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a bird called once and went silent. The coffee maker released a small sound. Maggie looked at Diana for a long moment. Apology accepted, she said. Not it's fine. Not don't worry about it. Not the social absolution that dissolves accountability. Just accepted, clean and complete. Diana nodded once. Now, Maggie said, tell me about your development plans. The actual ones, not the pitch deck. What do you want to build and why here? What followed was 3 hours of conversation that bore almost no resemblance to the Ross Avenue meeting. Partly this was because Diana, freed from the strategic performance of the conference room, turned out to be genuinely good at what she did. She spoke about the corridor development with a specificity and passion that wasn't in the pitch deck, describing not just luxury resort infrastructure, but a model of sustainable land use that incorporated working ranch operations, genuine ecological stewardship, and a financial structure designed for multi-generational stability. And partly it was because Maggie, on her own ground, asked different questions than Cole asked in a conference room. She asked about water. She asked about the cattle operations on the adjacent ranches. Would the development infrastructure disrupt the grazing patterns? She asked about the people who worked the land they'd already acquired, the hands, the foremen, the families who'd been there for decades. What happened to them in Diana's vision? Diana answered each question carefully, and Maggie thought honestly, some of the answers were good. Some revealed gaps in the planning that Diana acknowledged without defensiveness. By noon, they had a framework. Not a deal, a framework. The outlines of something that might become a deal if the details could be made to work. A joint venture in which the Calloway Land Trust retained full mineral rights and a 40% surface interest in the western parcels, with a management seat on the development's operating board, and a set of covenant protections for the working ranch operations on the retained acreage. The resort infrastructure would be developed on the remaining 60%. Under the Ashford Capital operational umbrella, with revenue sharing structured across a 30-year term, Cole would need months to document it properly. There would be attorneys and appraisers and tax advisors and negotiations over individual clauses that would take more hours than this kitchen table could hold. But the framework existed. Maggie walked Diana and her team out to the driveway afterward. The afternoon light had gone golden, that specific West Texas gold that happens in the late day when the sun is angled low and the air is dry enough to carry it clean and unfiltered. It made the mesquite shimmer. It made the pasture look like something painted. Diana stood beside the rental Escalade and looked out at it. "How many acres did you say?" she asked. 14,200. "And you run this with how many people?" "For full-time hands, 2 part-time in calving season." Maggie put her hands in her pockets. "And me?" Diana looked at her. Not with the social calibration of the engagement party or the strategic assessment of the conference room, but simply looked. The way you look at something you've only just understood. "My father was in construction," she said. "Started with 1 crew and a pickup truck. I grew up watching him work. He died when I was 30, and I took the company and pivoted to real estate development and tripled the revenue in 8 years." She was quiet for a moment. "I've spent the last 20 years convincing rooms full of people that I belong in them. I got good at reading who to align with and who to dismiss." She paused. "I dismissed you." "You did," Maggie said. "It wasn't an accusation, just a fact." "Because of your boots," Diana said. Maggie looked down at her boots. The good ones, the ones she wore to church and county auctions, and now, apparently, to meetings with people who would underestimate her based on them. "They're good boots," she said. Diana almost smiled. It was a real one, crooked and unguarded and briefly visible before it closed again. "Yes," she said, "they are." She drove back to Dallas that evening and thought about her father most of the way, the calluses on his hands, the truck he drove until it fell apart, the way he'd looked at buildings, the way other men looked at landscapes, with a particular love that was also a claim. She thought about what he would have made of the Callaway property, the scale of it, the quiet productivity of it, the way it existed in total indifference to anyone's opinion of its worth. She thought she knew what he would have made of Margaret Callaway. By the time she reached the city limits and the skyline came up against the dark sky ahead of her, she had decided to call her mother in the morning. They hadn't spoken in 3 weeks. A disagreement about something she could no longer precisely remember. She would call and not remember it and say hello and ask about the garden. It was a small decision, but some small decisions are the important ones. The formal joint venture agreement took 4 months to finalize. It was a complex document to 340 pages with exhibits that Cole said was the most thorough land partnership agreement he'd produced in his career. It protected the Callaway interests comprehensively, preserved the mineral rights in perpetuity, and included covenant language about the working ranch operations that had been, according to Cole, heavily negotiated. Maggie signed it on a Tuesday afternoon in November at the same kitchen table, with Cole across from her and the afternoon light coming through the window. She read the signature page twice, which was her habit, and then signed her name in full, Margaret Ann Callaway. She made a pot of coffee and they sat and drank it and didn't say much. The land looked elemental, old. "Your father would have liked this," Cole said. Maggie looked out the window. "He would have worried about it," she said. "He always worried. Even when things were good, he worried they wouldn't last." She was quiet for a moment. "I used to think that was a weakness. Now I think it's what made him so careful with the land." Cole nodded. "He taught me that land isn't an investment," she said. "It's a responsibility. You hold it for the people who come after you and for the people who work it and for the thing itself, the soil, the water, the life in it." She picked up her coffee. "Money is just what lets you keep doing that." The engagement party for Brooke and Derek was, eventually, followed by a wedding. It was held in the spring on the Callaway property, Brooke's choice, made quietly and firmly when the Whitfields offered the use of their country club in Dallas, and Diana Ashford offered the newly completed event pavilion. At the first finished section of the development corridor, Brooke had listened politely to both offers and said, with her mother's particular brand of gentle finality, "We're getting married at the farm." The ceremony was in the late afternoon, under a temporary structure of wood and white fabric that a local carpenter had built over a week in the south pasture. 300 guests sat in rented chairs facing west, where the sun was making its unhurried way toward the horizon. The mesquite was in new leaf, that particular soft green of Texas spring that doesn't last but is extraordinary while it does. Maggie wore the navy blue dress she kept for formal occasions. She had bought new boots for it, a pair she'd found at a shop in Abilene, dark chocolate brown with subtle stitching, good leather, the kind that would last 20 years. She walked Brooke down the aisle. There was no one else she would have asked. Diana Ashford attended the wedding. She had been invited, carefully, deliberately, by Brooke, who had made the decision on her own, and told her mother afterward. "Are you all right with that?" Brooke had asked. "It's your wedding," Maggie had said. "You invite who you want." Diana arrived with her husband, a quiet architect named William, whom most people found more immediately likable than his wife. She wore a dress that was elegant without demanding attention, and she sat on the groom's side, in the third row, and watched the ceremony with an expression that those near her described afterward as thoughtful. She had sent a wedding gift in advance, a piece of original artwork, a large-format photograph of West Texas's landscape by a Texas's photographer whose work Maggie had admired once in passing during a site visit. She had remembered. She had found the photographer and commissioned a print. It was a good gift. Maggie had hung it in the hallway. At the reception, late in the evening, when the dancing had been going for 2 hours and the tables were pleasantly disordered and the string lights over the pasture had turned the night into something warm and enclosed, Diana found Maggie standing at the edge of the gathering, a glass of sweet tea in hand, watching her daughter dance with her new husband. They stood side by side for a moment, not talking. The music was something slow. Brooke was laughing at something Derek had said, her head tipped back, her dress moving in the small night breeze. "She's remarkable," Diana said. "She is," Maggie agreed. "She gets it from her mother." Maggie looked at her sideways, a brief assessing look, checking for performance. She found none. "She gets it from herself," Maggie said. "Same place we all get it from if we're lucky." Diana was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said, at the kitchen table, about land being a responsibility. I think I've mostly thought about development as solving a problem, taking something underutilized and making it work harder." She looked out at the pasture, the string lights, the darkness beyond. "I don't think I'd ever thought about it the way you described, what it owes to what came before." Maggie didn't say anything. "I'm trying to think about it differently," Diana said, "for whatever that's worth." Maggie turned to look at her, fully this time, the way she'd looked at her across the conference table, and at the driveway, and at all the moments in between. She looked at a woman who was smart and driven, and capable of real cruelty, and also, apparently, capable of real change. Both things were true. Both things were part of what was standing in front of her. "It's worth something," Maggie said. "Not everything, but something." She raised her sweet tea slightly. Not quite a toast, not quite an acknowledgement, something in between, and looked back at her daughter dancing in the string lights. Later, much later, when the guests had gone, and the caterers were packing up, and the chairs were being stacked in the truck, Maggie walked the property alone. It was a habit she had. After large events, after hard days, after anything that moved the furniture of her life around, she walked the land. She went south along the pasture fence line, where the grass was pressed flat from the afternoon's foot traffic, and the ground still held the warmth of the day. She went west toward the Flat Creek corridor, following the fence by feel as much as by sight, the darkness full and soft around her. She crossed the old wooden bridge over the dry creek bed, dry in November, running in spring, and came up onto the slight rise on the far side where, on a clear night, you could see the lights of Abilene to the east and nothing at all to the west. She stood there for a while. She thought about her father, who had walked this same ground and worried about keeping it. She thought about the debt he'd left her, and the years she'd worked to transform it, and the slow, methodical accumulation that people who saw her briefly in her truck or at the feed store had no way of knowing. She thought about Brooke, dancing in string lights with a man who was going to try to be the kind of man who says something in the moment. She thought about Diana Ashford, who had looked at her and seen a barn woman and then looked again and seen something else, and whether that second look was enough, and decided that it was a beginning, and that beginnings were what she had to work with. She thought about what her mother used to say, "You know what you are. You don't need them to know it too." The lights of Abilene glowed soft and orange on the eastern horizon. The wind came from the northwest, cold and clean and smelling of distance. The land was dark and wide and absolutely still. Margaret Ann Calloway stood on the slight rise above Flat Creek and breathed in the air of the place she had spent her life holding together and growing and protecting, and she felt, in the way that sometimes comes only outdoors and only in the dark and only when you are completely alone with something true, the particular peace of a person who has never needed the world's accounting of their worth, because they have always kept their own. She stayed a long time. Then she walked home.